When I was a couple weeks short of my 70th birthday, I started thinking about my mother's mother, who lived to be 100, and her mother, who lived to be 102, and my father, who lived to be 90, longer than anyone we had ever heard of in his family. I began to think that maybe our generation could be the first to routinely live to be 100. When I talked about this at family dinner one night, my granddaughter, who was 5, said,
"What are you going to do for the next 30 years, Grandpa?"
Hello, I'm Dr. Janet Price.
And I'm Gregg Kaloust. And we are Oldish. And this is our podcast, Oldish.
If you're oldish or know someone who is, please join us every week for conversations amongst ourselves
And our special guests
about what it means to be oldish in the 21st century.
If you ever wonder whether you're getting old, you're oldish. What are you going to do for the next 30 minutes?
Hi, I'm Greg, and I'm oldish.
Hi, I'm Janet, and I'm oldish. Welcome to this episode of our podcast, Oldish, Conversations on Aging in the 21st Century. We're so excited today to have another episode with our dear friend, writer, author, poet, Leslie Ross-Degnan. We love having you here, Leslie, and we're both so excited to talk together, the three of us, about this book, which is called Grandma Gatewood's Walk, the inspiring story of the woman who saved the Appalachian Trail. It was a New York Times bestseller by Ben Montgomery. And Leslie, take it away.
Thanks, Janet. I really love the title of this story. I mean, it's so totally understated, because this, quote, walk that Emma Gatewood takes is a through hike of the entire Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine, all 2,050 miles of it. So, I mean, it's actually a lot more than a walk, right?
Yes. I think that's probably a good description of her is understated.
Yeah, no, I think she is. I think it's a perfect title. She just said, I'm going to go take a little walk. So she did. In September of 1955, Emma Gatewood, who's the mother of 11 children, the grandmother of 23 grandchildren, and at 67 years of age, she became the first woman to through walk the Appalachian Trail. And she earned the trail name of Grandma Gatewood. So yeah, pretty amazing what she did. But I just want to describe what I mean by through hiking. I use that word. I mean, through hiking means that you're walking every day. She walked every day from Georgia to Maine instead of, nonstop pretty much, instead of section hiking, which is the other expression that we're talking about, which most people do. They'll hike, for a week or so, and then they'll schedule another time to come back. And then eventually they'll hike the entire Appalachian Trail. But the through hike is a big deal, because you really never stray far away from the trail. So whether you're a hiker or not, or whether you've ever hiked any part of the Appalachian Trail, you're going to find this a very interesting read. But before we get into our discussion, because I know you guys are chomping at the bit, we all love this book. You really are looking forward to talking about it.
Yes.
I want to talk a little bit about Ben Montgomery, the author who wrote this, and who he is and what else he's written. When I first learned that he was a former reporter for the Tampa Bay Times, I was a little bit concerned that this book was going to be sort of a, newspaper read, like all the facts, please. And I thought, I wonder what that's going to be like. But then I learned that before he wrote Grandma Gatewood, that he was a finalist, actually, for the Pulitzer Prize in Local Reporting in 2010. I thought, okay, that's good. And then after he wrote Grandma Gatewood, he won the 2014 Outdoor Book Award for this book. And then I was really looking forward to jumping into this book. I had read it before, but I hadn't really, it was a long time ago. And you know what it's like when you read books twice? You get so much more out of it the second time around. I think we all had that experience with John Steinbeck too. Yes. But I looked what else Montgomery had written and found that some of his other books, there was a theme of unsung heroes in all of his books and all the amazing things that these everyday people accomplished. And he also focused on certain periods of history, which I found very interesting about Grandma Gatewood in the 50s when she hiked the Appalachian Trail. So just let me give you an example of some of his other books, because I'm not going to go into too much description of them, but because the title alone kind of hints at the contents. So in 2014, he wrote Grandma Gatewood's Walk, but in 2016, he wrote a book called The Leper Spy. And then the subtitle of that is, which he had a subtitle for Grandma Gatewood too. The subtitle for The Leper Spy is the story of an unlikely hero of World War II. And it's briefly about a woman who was smuggling supplies across enemy lines. And she was able to do this because, she had leprosy, and Japanese didn't want to touch her or refused to search her. So she was a perfect spy, which sounds like an interesting tale. And then in 2018, 2 years later, it seems like he wrote a book every 2 years, he wrote The Man Who Walked Backwards, an American Dreamer's Search for Meaning in the Great Depression. Another interesting period, about this man. His name's Plenty Wingo. I love that name, right? He decided to walk across America, but not just the straightforward way. He did it backwards. And Montgomery charts his walk across the America of Woody Guthrie, John Steinbeck, and the New Deal, right? And then across the Atlantic to Germany, Turkey, and beyond. This guy walked backwards across America, the world, practically.
That may be one of our future books to look at together.
And then his most current book was written in 2022, and it's actually getting a lot of great reviews. 2021, I mean. It's called A Shot in the Moonlight: How a Freed Slave and a Confederate Soldier Fought for Justice in the Jim Crow South. And this is an interesting story about a tobacco farmer who was accused of stealing livestock. And then this white mob came after him, right? And he fired. They were shooting at his house, and he fired back in self-defense. And he killed the son of a wealthy Kentucky family. So it outlines this legal battle that this man, George Dinning, he became the very first Black man in America to win damages after a wrongful murder conviction. Yeah, and sounds very inspiring. So that's what he's most recently. You might want to look those up, and maybe we'll just put some of them on the website. I don't know if you want to do that or not, but if people are interested,
That's a good idea.
Look up the other things that he's written.
Yeah, I'll definitely put links to them on the website.
Yeah. So, with Grandma Gatewood's walk, as with other stories. All right, let's start walking. Okay, so he didn't just write about the person. He didn't just write about her experience on the Appalachian Trail at the age of 65. He also wrote about her life before the epic walk and why she wanted to take this hike and what was going on historically during the time of her walk.
One thing you just commented on in your introduction that was a part of my experience was just the terminology. So a thru walk, I didn't know what a thru walk was. There's a lot of things I didn't know that I learned about as far as just hiking the Appalachian Trail. In fact, I'm just going to throw out a couple questions that are concrete, but when she had to go through water, so she had someone take her on a boat or, different things like that. Is that a universal experience for people climbing the Appalachian Trail? Or have they made the path different now so that you don't have to have a boat at some point?
Oh yeah, I think it's changed a lot since I think it was 1937 when they finished the trail in Maine. They were putting the final touches on the trail. But I think that she did some of that water crossing after there was a lot of rain and the rivers were swollen and she couldn't get over them. And yeah, but I think because of her, which is one of the reasons that it's called the inspiring story of the woman who saved the Appalachian Trail, she kept a journal her whole walk, and she talked about the rough parts of the trail and the bad parts and how they needed to get in there and fix stuff,
Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. The other thing that is just a concrete thought or just comment or exclamation point is that she did this without a GPS, without a cell phone. And it made me wonder, how did she know that I would say that she was walking this far and knew and was going to stop at a lean to or stop at there were some houses. Was that always spontaneous? It sounded like some of it was planned. And how did she plan that without what we would use today?
Yeah, I don't think she did plan it. I mean, she also walked, she didn't have hiking boots. She just had Keds or some kind of sneak.
Yeah.
They have a backpack.
Yeah.
Yeah, she just had this little bag she slung over her shoulder that she made, sewed it herself.
Yes.
You know, she didn't have any of that kind of equipment. She put some food in it, but she didn't. She just had a blanket. She didn't even have a tent. She wasn't packing all this freeze-dried food that didn't weigh very much.
Yes.
You know, she'd have to get off the trail and go and then find it again the next day and go ask somebody if she could sleep in their barn. Or that was an interesting part of the story, you know. People just took you in back then, you know. Like you knock at their door and say, "Hey, I'm hiking on the Appalachian Trail. Can I, you know, do you have an extra room?" And people would often invite her in and feed her and, you know, let her get dried off and cleaned up.
It does show like a difference of times because there was more trust on her end that she could stop at strangers' houses and she would be safe, basically. Trust on their end that this person who'd been hiking for days and whatever she happened to look like as far as her hair, her clothes, that they trusted her. So as I was reading, I kept thinking that was kind of in the back of my mind, like, oh no, is something going to happen to her now because she just went to this person's house or she got in this guy's car because she was trying to get somewhere or, yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot safer.
The good news for people that we've made nervous now is that she did make it through. Nothing really bad happened to her in any of the scary situations. She reported that only one person turned her away, and he seemed to have turned her away because he thought she was a revenuer. She was trying to spy out his still and make him pay taxes on the whiskey that he was making illegally. And he chased her away with a gun, and she just went down the road and found somebody to take her in and made friends with people. She reported, you know, corresponding with many of these people for years afterwards. She just, I think she's almost like the poster person for spunky. You know, she did not exhibit a lot of fear. And there's no way I would do some of the stuff that she did. She walked past growling dogs and knocked on the door. She came to empty houses and slept on the porch. I think where she described or where he talked about, she went ahead to this shelter in such and such a place. I think he put that in. I don't think she knew. She knew generally where the trail was, and she kept going until she found a place to sleep at night. Or if she needed shelter from a storm or something, she would keep going until she could find shelter. She didn't have a guidebook. He said many times that she didn't have a map. So she didn't even have a piece of paper with a map on it that showed where the trail was. She had read this article I think it was in National Geographic or something. And that article was all like, oh, it's a great walk. It's America's walk. And, you know, anybody can do it and blah, which probably was true for some of the sections that the writer had visited. But she was the first person she was the first woman, and she might have even been the first person to actually thru hike it. Because he reported that there was a man who had done it a few years prior, but when she was definitely the first woman, but the man that he was reporting as being the first thru hiker turned out later on there was lots of question marks, and somebody who had met him on the trail said, oh no, he skipped over all of these miles. And so that's controversial. She might have actually been the first human to thru hike the whole thing in one go.
Stats on that.
She did it because she felt like it. You know, she was 67 or 68 years old.
In the 1930s, only about 5 people reported hiking the entire trail, but in sections, not through hiking. In the 1940s, there were only 3 who had walked it in sections. In 1950, when Emma hiked, only 14 other after Emma hiked. So she was one of 14, but she was the only woman. You're absolutely right. And then it gets better. In 1970, there were 80 people that thru hiked. In 1980s, there were 1,420. And then the 90s, there were 3,000. In the 2000s, there were over 5,000, almost 6,000 people who thru hiked the Appalachian Trail. Yeah. But you're right about hearing it about. She was in the doctor's office reading. Yeah. She first heard about it in National Geographic. And I have some interesting quotes here because the article said that the trail was, quote, as wide as a Mack truck, that shelters were plentiful and food was easy to come by. And it also said it doesn't require any special skill or training to traverse, and anyone in normal good health could hike it. Well, if you've ever hiked any part of the Appalachian Trail, you know that's not true. And, it definitely wasn't. And afterwards, Emma said, I would never have started this trip if I had known how tough it was. But I couldn't quit once she started. She was tenacious. She wasn't going to quit.
Yeah.
Yes, spunky and tenacious.
Yeah. Her story was remarkable. She was, I don't want to do spoilers on her backstory, but holy smokes. She just came from out of this really hard place. And she was a very tough woman and did something that even today, how many people can you think of out of the, you said, I think, Leslie, 5,000 people last year or some period of time, 5,000 people walked it. Those people had thousands of dollars worth of equipment on them. They were carrying packs that didn't weigh anything. They, super high tech tents and all of that stuff. And she had some dungarees, some keds, an old plaid shirt, a flannel shirt, and a bag that she sewed that she just flung this bag with extra stuff over her. It's exhausting to drive 2,000 miles. And she walked it. She went through 6 or 7 pairs of shoes. And she never did get hiking boots. She did the whole thing, when she needed new shoes, she went in the store and bought kids.
Another pair of sneakers.
What a woman.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, not to mention what she met on the train.
She did it again 2 years later.
Yeah.
That blew me away.
Yeah.
That's right. And again, she did it 3 times, didn't she? Yeah.
Yeah, she did it more than once. Her second hike, she was 60. She did 57 at 69. Yeah. And then she hiked again in 1964 at 76 years old. Yeah. But the book focused on her first hike. Yeah. Right.
So one of the things that the book said was when she finally reached the end and the top and signed the registry, she said she had, quote, never felt so alone in my life. I wondered what that meant. I wondered what you two think of that as far as what that was about.
Well, that's an interesting comment. I think that she hiked the trail to be alone.
I think she was alone. There were a couple of people that met her there, but she had been alone on the trail and she was very self-contained and no one else had ever done it. So in what very real sense, she was alone at the top of Mount Katahdin. Certainly no other woman, but really not very many other people had done that thing. And she had been essentially alone for 4 or 5 months. And there weren't like thousands of hikers. Once in a while, she'd run into somebody. But she was all alone at the top of Mount Katahdin.
I just wondered if there was anything else in that sentence as far as a statement about, in this moment, as she reached the top by herself alone, that she felt how alone she was. Like, who would she call in that moment to share that with, or maybe, I'm probably reading into it, but just, that what we do know of her story and how alone she must have felt her whole adult life with an abusive husband. It's, 11 kids to raise and grandchildren. And she used to go out into the woods during those times to find safety and a place to recuperate. And anyway, I found that interesting because I wondered if there was more to it, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's good that you made that point. That what I said before was that I thought she escaped to the wanted to be alone in the beginning, but, I thought that she had a tough life. She grew up on a farm in Ohio, and then her marriage to this guy, P.C. Gatewood, was very emotionally and physically abusive. And, she, like you said, she disappeared in the woods. And that, for me, that was the hardest part of the book to read. But it did establish her as a very strong person and a real survivor. And, she must have had a lot of post-traumatic stress. We didn't call it that back then, but, all those years of physical and emotional abuse, and being alone probably felt pretty good to her because nobody was going to hurt her. And I think she was also pretty cautious, and that made her even more of a loner because she didn't want to, put herself in the path of that kind of behavior again, But I also thought that after having a husband like that, the Appalachian Trail must have seemed like a stroll in the park. It wasn't the hardship that it probably was for lots of other people, because her entire life was hardship. And I thought that was relevant.
Yes. Yeah, another quote was throughout the book, as she was hiking
Go ahead, Janet.
and people, started to know her story, and then more and more there were reporters waiting for her. And it seemed like throughout her experience, more and more people were asking her, why did you do this? What made you do this? And she, most of the time, just had a pretty vague response, like, I just felt like it. It seemed like a nice thing to do. I like to walk. But I wrote down this one response where she said, what made you do this? I find a restfulness. The woods made me feel more contented. And so it kind of goes along with what you were just saying, Leslie, about after a life like that, after all these years of raising all of her children, and she said hanging up diapers and feeding them, that just to be able to leave and walk and do what she wanted, go where she wanted, must have felt in some ways, especially at the beginning, I don't know if it was all the way through, but just such a gift for herself.
One of the things that she said was that she hadn't told her children that she was doing this for the first couple of months of this, because she was afraid they would try and stop her. And when they found out, they was like, no, you go, girl. We're not going to try to stop you from doing that. You've had a hard time, and this is amazing. She was a quintessential oldish person. That's why we all love this book and why we wanted to talk about this book on our podcast about not giving up. In the 1950s, a woman who was 67 there was no concept of oldish at that point, but it's like that was old when she did it. So she almost, in some ways, she invented oldishness. So I have a quote that I'm going to put on our website once I get permission. So I'm going to read you this quote. This is the one quote that I picked out of the book. And this comes from an interview that she did with someone. She said, "The forest is a quiet place and nature is beautiful. I don't want to sit and rock. I want to do something."
Go,
You wrote
Grandma.
down that
Dave.
quote also.
That's oldish.
Yes,
That's our motto.
I saw that too. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I wrote that down too.
Oh, she
That
never
jumped out
stopped.
at me.
Yeah. No, she never stopped. That's really true. She was a go-go girl.
Yes. And a couple other quotes that go with that. She said, "What is it with old people and mountains?" So that was interesting. And then she also said, "I just do what I want to do." So after all this time of not being able to do, having to do things for others, I just do what I want to do.
I know, it was great.
Yeah,
So
perfect.
there was a big question here, though, that the story answered. And I thought, I just wanted to really talk about this because the title of the story is The Inspiring Story of the Woman Who Saved the Appalachian Trail. And I'm saying, okay, so how did Emma save the Appalachian Trail? So immediately I thought about all the press that she got towards the end because she was an old woman hiking the Appalachian Trail. And she became famous by the time she got to Maine because reporters were hearing about her. In the beginning, it wasn't so bad. But then, people would say, oh, there's this old woman hiking the trail, Grandma Gatewood. That's what they called her. That was her trail name. That's how she got her name. And then reporters would meet her in different states and interview her. She drew so much attention to herself hiking at 67 years old. And the press knows a good story when they see one, right? I mean, even Sports Illustrated came after her. And I loved that. I was like, oh, they have Sports Illustrated?
Yeah.
Back in the 50s? Pretty amazing. So, I mean, being the first person also to hike the Appalachian Trail 3 times, newspaper called her the female hiking champion of the United States, maybe the world,
Yeah.
and the nation's most famous hiker, a living legend among hikers. And all those titles were attributed to her, given to her. But she was also, and this was fun to read too, interviewed on TV talk shows. And these are names from the past, like Art Linkletter, right? Art Linkletter, Groucho Marx. He had that talk show, You Bet Your Life. I mean, they all interviewed her. I mean, can you imagine this? What that was like? So she was very, very well known. So whenever somebody also asked her about the condition, she was very honest.
She told the truth.
Know?
She told the truth about the condition
the
of the trail.
Yep, she did.
The second time she hiked it, the writer said that a lot of improvements had already been made. So people got at it. They said, well, we can't have grandma walking in this horror show. Let's fix it up. And maybe other people will want to walk on it too.
Well, I think she inspired a lot of people to walk on it.
It made me want to do it.
Heck, if Grandma Gatewood could do it, I could do it, right? I'm not saying me, but other people that wanted to walk it. I mean, I have hiked parts of the Appalachian Trail. Parts of it are really tough. But I wouldn't want to do it right now at this age. Yeah. Honestly.
Oh.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So yeah, she really did draw a lot of attention to it because there were parts that were poorly marked. She got lost a lot. She had to backtrack, or sometimes she'd meet somebody. But the thing, she was very honest about. A lot of people that thru hike it will take a ride from a car to go to another part of the trail because this part of the trail is rough. So it's like it's like cheating, right? So I'm gonna go and pick it up about 20 miles down the road or something like that. She never did that. I mean, she didn't have the wherewithal or the a car or any way to communicate with cell phones and that kind of thing. To be able to do that. She did every single mile of it, and then some. She got lost a lot.
But I noticed that when she did, someone picked her up to take her to their house for the night, she would have them drop her off right where they picked her up. So she would start exactly where she left off. I noticed that one of the quotes that goes along with what we were saying that made me think is, after 20 years, and I referred to this a little bit, after 20 years of hanging diapers and seeing my children grow up and go on their own way, I decided to take a walk, one I always wanted to take. And it just made me think about the symbolism of walking in life and how, for me, how powerful that sentence was. I decided to take a walk, one I always wanted to take. Yeah. Just kind of touched my heart. A walk she always wanted to take, being free, being her spunky self, all the things that were in her that she showed in other ways as far as surviving. But this walk that she had always wanted to take. I like that.
Yeah. It's funny then when she was
oldish to me.
It. Yeah. 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 I mean, she said to her daughter, Lucy, who sort of at the end of her life, when she got really old and wasn't hiking the Appalachian Trail anymore, she was hiking other trails, but not the Appalachian Trail. Yes. Her daughter said that when she would say to her daughter, when I'm dead and gone, there'll be monuments built in my memory. And there were. There are monuments in Ohio built to her. There are monuments, along the Appalachian Trail. I can't remember all of them.
I think in a few different states, so Ohio, I think maybe Georgia. But she also got a lot of awards, which, they got things named after her in different states. So I don't know what happened after that with those awards, but I'm imagining them calling it, this is the Grandma Gatewood Award or something like that.
Well, I was just going to talk a little more about the other trails she hiked. She hiked the Oregon Trail. That was when she was 71 years old. She hiked the Oregon Trail in 95 days. And I think that was from like Missouri to Portland, Oregon or something like that. That was a long trail.
Made me wonder, like, what it didn't say that much about what it was like for her day to day on the walk as she hiked. Like, where was her mind? Was it divided between making sure she stayed on the path, making sure the path was safe, and then just noticing everything around her? Or was it, because there's something about it that sounded obviously that it was her happy place. So that even when she was done with the Appalachian Trail, that she went on to these other trails, and that so she was always hiking somewhere. And whether it was her own internal competition of, let's see how many trails I can hike. But it just was interesting to me that after she through hiked the Appalachian Trail, she went back and did it again. And then she went back and did it again. And either in between or in amongst all of that, then she was climbing these other trails. So there's something about it that was almost like at the foundation of her identity in a way.
Yeah. She really kept hiking. And then when she's back home in Ohio, she started to mark and blaze a trail through Gallia County where she grew up. And she connected it to the Buckeye Trail. And it ran between Cincinnati and Lake Erie. And at 82 years old, she worked on that trail all day at 82, from 7 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock at night in the woods, all alone in the woods, blazing this trail.
Wow.
I know. Amazing.
She's like our hero, model, or, like this is what you can be as an oldish person.
I think that was the trail, the one that she blazed. I think that was the trail that they did the January hike on. Every January, she and other hikers would meet out there, and it became this tradition. And at some point, thousands of people were coming out to hike that trail. And she would set the pace. She would start to hike it, and she would set the pace, and they would follow her. But when she got older, because she couldn't hike it anymore, but she would be there, and people would come, and hike that trail, and she would be the host and the greeter and welcome people and get them started on the trail, give them drinks and stuff. I love that.
So a couple more quotes about, because I was just really interested in what was her internal machinations about this. And so one response to why do it was maybe exploring the world was a good way to explore her own mind. That's what I wonder about. And then another quote, the petty entanglements of life are brushed aside like cobwebs when you're out there in the woods.
So we want to talk about the end of her life?
Yeah.
Sure.
Some of those traditions continued when Emma got older, into her 80s. And after working in her garden all day, she had the life of a farm girl still, even in her 80s, a farm woman. She'd work in the garden all day. She called her son and she told him that she wasn't feeling very well, right? And that was a big red flag because Nelson, her son, reported that she had never been sick a day in her life. So he called an ambulance, right? And the ambulance came immediately because of that. But by the time that the ambulance got to her and Nelson got to her house, she was already in a coma. And then, a couple days later, she died. But it's like right up to the end. I mean, right up to the very end, she was really healthy and strong and working in the garden and hiking these trails. And, what an amazing role model she was.
Yeah. One of the quotes that was on the back cover before I even started reading the book said, anything is possible no matter your age. So that would be interesting to put on our website. Anything is possible no matter your age, says Grandma Gatewood. So as we wind down from this really enjoyable conversation, I want to thank Grandma Gatewood for her tenacity and for her spunkiness. She's definitely a hero for everyone, and especially for us as oldish people. And I want to thank you, Leslie, for being here and bringing you to the conversation and all that you shared. and Gregg. It was wonderful to spend time with you again. So the three of us, I'm predicting, will be together again for our next book.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. It was
Yes.
really a pleasure to be here.
It was fun. You've really have become a big part of our Oldish podcast, Leslie, and we're very grateful for that and for your presence and for your intelligence and humor as we're talking about these books. And so thank you for being on with us again. And Janet,
you're
as
welcome.
always, wonderful to sit and talk with you, and just great. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be back. That's it for now. Thanks for listening. We enjoyed our visit and hope you did too. You'll find links to this book and others written by Ben Montgomery in the show notes. If you buy one of them after clicking the link, we may get a small commission. You can think of it as an easy way to support our podcast. Next week, we'll be talking with Pat Smith, author of the new book, Pickleball, The Curious History. Pat was there at the beginning as a child in the neighborhood where it all began, and it will be fun to hear from the oldish Pat, who's found the game again after all these years. You can leave comments or requests for topics or guests on this or other episodes at www.oldish.me. There's a link there, too, if you've wondered how you can help support our podcast. If you like what you heard today, please tell a friend and rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.